What if you gave your all at work day in and day out, but still couldn't afford to feed your family? What if your paycheck was smaller than your coworkers simply because of your race, your gender, or where you come from? That's not just unfair, it's a violation of human right number 23. Human rights violations are what we dive into every episode of the Let's Talk About Human Rights show. We break down the rights you already have and why they're more important today than ever. I'm your host, Julz Allender, and our organization is committed to an enlightening and educating people all around the globe on their human rights, especially those laid out in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Our mission? To inspire and equip every man, woman, and child to not only understand their rights, but to stand up and protect them for themselves and for others. So let's unpack what that really means, because knowing your rights is the first step to defending them. We're going to start by looking at Article number 23 from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states, 1. Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. 2. Everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work. 3. Everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. 4. Everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of his interest. And now let's take a look at a short video on this specific human right.
Hey, kid! Come on.
Hey, wait up! There's a mistake. I am more than this.
Seems okay to me, kid. Maybe you should check your math. Hey there. Hey, boss. See what you got. Maybe you should check yours.
Rather than discussing that particular right, let's take a look at something else. Where do your rights come from? I want to talk about something that touches every one of us, something bigger than politics, bigger than nations, bigger even than history itself. I want to talk about your rights. Now, the United Nations has a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 30 articles, more than 50 rights in total. But instead of listing them all, let's take a deeper question. Where do these rights actually come from? Did we inherit them from our ancestors? Did a politician grant them with a stroke of a pen? Did we fight a war to earn them? Or did we stumble upon them like a prize in a lottery? The truth is, none of these. If you read the very first sentence of the preamble to the Declaration, it says this: recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Inherent, inalienable. Let's pause there. Inherent means natural, built in, as much a part of you as your eye color, your fingerprint, your very heartbeat. Inalienable means they cannot be sold, cannot be transferred, cannot be taken away. No judge, no king, no government, no tyrant can strip them from you. These words matter because they remind us your rights are yours simply because you are human. But let me ask you this. What about the prisoner? What about the child being bullied? What about the oppressed living under tyranny? Haven't their rights been taken away? No. Their rights are not gone. They are being suppressed. Rights can be hidden, they can be denied, but they cannot be erased. Evil can create the illusion that rights have vanished, but the truth, they remain always. This idea that rights are permanent, natural, untouchable has echoed across centuries. Thomas Jefferson called them inalienable in the American Declaration of Independence. John Locke called them natural rights, life, liberty, and property. Locke argued that government exists to protect rights, not to grant them. Go further back, Aquinas tied rights to being created in God's image. Cicero spoke of universal laws written into nature itself. Aristotle distinguished between laws made by man and laws that came from nature. So across cultures, across centuries, across civilizations, the same truth resounds. Your rights do not come from rulers. They come from your very humanity. Now, why does this matter? Because if you believe rights come from governments, you also believe governments can take them away. If you believe rights come from documents, you also believe rights disappear when documents are torn up. And that is how oppression works. The greatest trick of tyranny is to convince you that your freedom is a privilege and that it can be revoked. But here's the truth, plain and simple. Your rights are not granted. Your rights are not negotiated. Your rights are not earned. They are inherent. They are inalienable. They are yours. So the next time you read the United Nations Charter on Human Rights, don't think of it as a gift for the future. Think of it as a mirror reflecting who you already are. You are free because that is the nature of being human. And to deny that is to deny your very self. My guest today is Nola Brantley. Her personal experiences make her an expert on human trafficking. She has taken those experiences and uses them to motivate others into action. And with that, I'd like to welcome Nola to our show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Why don't you just give us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this industry?
Oh, that's a very broad question. Sure. So I've been focused on child sex trafficking for about the past 20 years. And so when I first got into the field of social services, I came in to provide parenting support to parents whose children had been removed from their care due to allegations of abuse or neglect. And it was in doing that work and doing charity work for the community. So at the same time I was doing the parenting support work, I had really subscribed to this idea that you have to build a relationship with the community to really help them. So I was in a particular community, high rates of violence, high rates of poverty. And I was in the process over the course, at that point, it had been 7 years of really trying to build a relationship with that community through services and through charity. So one of the things that we used to do that I would love was we had 4 free events a year. One was for back to school, one was for Thanksgiving, one was for Christmas, and one was for the summertime. But see, I grew up going to these free events, so I know how the events are. So I just love making the events different. So you can come and be helped because, like you said, you have a right to have the things that you need, and you don't have to feel humiliated because of that. You don't have to be belittled because of that, and you don't have to be disregarded because of that. People can give you things that you need and still want to honor you, still want to kind of spoil you, and still want to pamper you. And so I really enjoyed doing that through the giveaways. And the one that I loved the best was the Family Fun Day. That was the summertime event. We created a whole summertime carnival with activities and entertainment and a farmer's market and, you know, food to eat. And there was nothing that you can pay for at this event.
Wow.
Everything was free. Families signed in, they got tickets, and everything was free because I remember being a kid going to so many different events with my mom, and she just didn't have the money to really get anything for us.
Right.
Or maybe not able to ride the rides, but she just took us because she was doing the best that she could. And I just like, parents don't have to need that stress. It's already stressful enough being a parent, but having that stress when you're trying to have a good time with your kid, it's really hard. So that event was like giving families a chance just to be together, to have fun, and to not have to think about money for the day. And so, yeah, I really love that event. And I just loved building a relationship with the community. And it was like in that, I was in that space, when the issue of children being sold for sex, at least in the city that I was in, became a topic. And so once that became a topic, I really began to focus a lot of my energy and attention, on that topic. And eventually I had to kind of give all the programs I was running to my assistant, and she ran those programs. And I solely focused on the issue at that time. Sadly, we were calling it teenage prostitution because we
Right.
didn't have the correct language for it yet. We weren't aware of the Traffic and Victims Protection Act and the term commercially sexually exploited child. I had not met David Batstone yet and read Not for Sale. There was a lot that had not happened yet for us to understand this issue fully. And in my city, county, even state, I was a leader in helping us understand this issue. So it was a journey. Eventually, we understood that kids who were being bought and sold on the streets were victims of human trafficking, and that the TVPA identified them as commercially sexually exploited children. It was right around this time, but I was able to understand I was also a survivor of the same thing. But it was so normalized in my community that I didn't even know I had been victimized. I thought I was lucky. I thought I had got to experience things that other kids didn't get to experience, but that was at the hands of a man that was 20 years older than me and who
Wow.
was abusing me. So, I was like, oh, wow. So people, when they talk to me, they always are like, oh, we know that you do this work because you know of your own victimization. I'm like, I wouldn't even have known I was a victim or a survivor if I hadn't started doing this work. So that is a very a backwards journey, but I'm grateful for it. And so once I realized that, it made me double down and triple down and quadruple down on really wanting to, help young people. But that turned into a lifelong journey of my own healing and recovery. And at the same time, helping other people. I can only help them as much as I can help myself.
Right.
So the more I can help myself, then that's always the more I can help others. And healing is a lifelong journey. So it continues to be a journey, but I'm very grateful for it. And I'm grateful for how I found it all.
And I'm sure thousands of others are grateful for the work that you do. One for just, I don't, I've interviewed a tremendous amount of people on this show and a tremendous amount of people involved in human rights, violations or helping in one way or the other. And not all of them are willing to get that involved in community, and have that passion and that drive to build the relationship first with the community, ensure that their community is taken care of, they're cared for, they have the necessities, and to lift their community. Again, I'm sure thousands are grateful for the work that you've done and will continue to do. And then, on the sex trafficking, I mean, it's a profound statement, where you don't know it's done until you're educated on what got done, right? And so you
were saying about human rights. I was thinking,
right.
wow, that's dead on.
Exactly. Is you don't know you're actually being violated. Your human rights are being violated until you have the education on what it actually is. So, just in that statement alone that you said, it's like, it's the need to continue to educate, which you're doing through your work, to ensure
Well, and
that.
sometimes people will be like, well, why don't people ask for help? And I'll be like, because they don't know that they're a
Right.
victim. They know life sucks.
Right.
They know
Right.
that life is better for other people,
Right.
but they don't know what's happening to them is illegal.
Right. Right. And especially this topic, it's a gruesome topic. I think every time I interview someone in this area, I'm always surprised at how many organizations surround this area, and it shows you how prevalent it is in our state, in our country, when we think it just happens elsewhere. It's an ugly subject. It's hard to confront. And so I want to start off and ask if you're willing to share, what are the myths in society about child sex trafficking?
Oh, there's so many. And I would say the ones that exist for kids, they exist even double time for people that end up still trapped there as adults. So let me just say that first and foremost. I think the number one myth is that they made a choice, that these children or even adults somehow made a choice to enter the commercial sex industry. Do they make choices? Absolutely. They might choose to run away from an abusive situation. They might choose to trust someone that maybe they should not have. They might choose to believe someone maybe they should not have. They might choose to get in a car. They might choose to go to a party. They definitely have agency and make choices. but I've rarely, if ever, met a child that made a conscious choice to enter the commercial sex industry. So that's a big one. Another one would be that they make a lot of money. Now, is a lot of money made off of them? Oh, absolutely. But do they make a lot of money? No. That's a very rare occasion. The average kid that I would meet didn't even have enough money in their pocket to buy themselves a box of tampons
Wow.
or a book if they wanted to after working all night and having sex with people so that the trafficker can benefit from it financially. So that's another myth that these kids are making a lot of money. Even when I start doing the work, I thought that I was going to need to have a lot of money to replace the money that they were getting in the commercial sex industry, like, to keep them safe. No. Having lotion, hygiene products, making sure they can get undergarment that they needed that were their size. Like, they weren't getting basic minimum things. So this idea of, them getting a bunch of money, another myth, that they're all bad kids. Like, these are all kids that were acting up and they're promiscuous and if they're girls, they like older men. That's all a big lie. These are children that have already been traumatized. I've never met a kid that was sex trafficked that had not already been traumatized in their earlier childhood. 95% of the kids I've met that are sex trafficked were sexually abused during their earlier childhood, and most of them throughout childhood, until it led to their vulnerability in the commercial sex industry. So they're not bad kids, but they are kids that a lot of bad things have happened to, sadly.
Right. Yeah. And can you define commercial sexual exploitation for our audience?
Yeah, well, I'll define three things because it's really necessary in tiers. So sexual abuse is right whenever an adult has any sexual contact with a kid, including being naked in front of them when it's not welcome or natural, including pornography, watching, anything. It doesn't just have to be intercourse, anything. Watching them through a door where they're supposed to be showering or be naked, anything like that could be considered sexual abuse, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so commercial sexual exploitation is a form of sexual abuse. That's why I want to lay that foundation.
Mm-hmm.
After kids are sexually abused, what happens next usually is they're sexually exploited. Sexual exploitation is when you have someone under 18 that's not having one or more of their basic needs met. This could be tangible or intangible: food, clothing, shelter, love, attention, affirmation. You have an adult that sees that vulnerability and meets those basic needs, but is also having sex with the child. That would be considered sexual exploitation. This can happen to homeless kids a lot. Someone offers them a place to sleep for the night, and then when they get there, the person's wanting to have sex with them. And the homeless kid can decide to go back into the streets or to oblige this adult, and that would be sexual exploitation. Now, the next step is commercial sexual exploitation. This is when you have three people involved. You have the child who's under 18. You have someone who is paying to sexually abuse the child. And then you have someone who is profiting off of the child's sexual abuse and exploitation. That would be a commercially sexually exploited child. So this could be like a trafficker or a pimp who is a stranger to the child, but meets them somewhere, starts to trick them, manipulate them, take advantage of them, and eventually is selling them for sex. But this can also be their family. This can be a child's mother or uncle who may have a drug habit or is wanting something that they can afford and is not a good person morally because of whatever their life experience has been, that they feel comfortable exchanging the child for that. So bottom line, with commercial sexual exploitation, you have three people involved: a child who's being victimized, someone who's paying to have sex with the child, and someone who's profiting off of the child's sexual abuse and exploitation.
Got it. Thank you for I think all of those are very important to know and know the sequence of events. Now, how prevalent is this? Go ahead.
It's a continuum.
Right.
That's why I put it down like that, because out of all the kids I've sat with, and it's been thousands,
right,
I've rarely met a kid that did not travel that continuum.
Right.
And I traveled that continuum. So, kids don't just get to the commercial sex industry by chance. They get there because when you're first sexually abused, there's things that are affected. You link love, sex, and abuse. You have a violation of your boundaries. You begin to view yourself as a sexual object. You get really, really low self-esteem, and you're full of guilt and shame. Those things help to propel you to sexual exploitation and then to commercial sexual exploitation.
Right. And what is the prevalence of this?
Oh, it's way more prevalent than what we want to know. It is very prevalent. And when you're thinking about certain children, like kids in foster care or that are part of the juvenile justice system, it's even more prevalent with them because traffickers know that they don't have anyone looking out for them.
Right.
Obviously, kids that are living in extreme poverty, it's going to be more prevalent for them because traffickers can capitalize on the fact that they're living in extreme poverty and there may be a lot of need in, their lives and in their families. My trafficker used to put groceries in my family's refrigerator.
Wow. Yeah. I just, oh my God. Every time I get to this topic and this subject, it just cuts deep, just the vulnerability, the innocence and the evilness that is all connected to the innocence of a child,
And it changes them. Like when kids
Oh,
are sexual,
totally.
when they're part of the commercial sex industry, it changes them forever. And I don't say this to sound hopeless, like it means that you can never have a great life again. Of course you can.
Right.
But it does change you forever. I've watched it, I've seen it, you know what I mean? And for the average, young person that I've met that's experienced this, they're working to heal from this. Of course, healing is a lifelong journey, but I mean in a very concentrated way for at least the next decade. So it has a spiritual,
Right.
a physical, a social,
Yeah.
and a high emotional impact on their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Without a doubt. And so where does this most reside from your viewpoint and from what you've seen in the kids that you've worked with?
Where does it happen most often?
Yeah.
Well, it happens most often, I would say, places where kids are at that are most at risk. So, for example, I mentioned the foster care system and the juvenile justice system, especially with kids that are, in out of home placement. They're placed in group homes or what they call STRPs now, or in foster homes. Those kids, again, are seen as being extremely vulnerable.
And
You
so,
also have
go ahead.
you also have kids that are not in the system, right? But they're living in poverty and they've already experienced other trauma, most likely sexual abuse. That creates an extreme vulnerability. So you see a lot of the kids that are being trafficked that coming from that situation. Another big one is our youth who are LGBTQ plus. A lot of them are kicked out of their homes when, their parents find out their status, and like in 1 minute they're homeless and desperate and heartbroken. So people take advantage of them from that point of view as well. So, and then just speaking on that, homeless youth. So even if you're not LGBTQ, but you're just
Right.
homeless, if you're homeless, it's like it's a very slim chance you won't be sex trafficked. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're homeless, like it's huge for our homeless youth.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And is it true that, and I think you kind of touched on this, but in terms of where sexual abuse starts, like for the very first time, or is it typically within a family or someone that they know?
Yeah, this is very complicated. So,
Okay. That's why I
Let me
asked you, the expert.
yeah, I'm going to speak from the perspective of someone who's African American right now, and I'm African American
Sure.
and Puerto Rican. So I'm going to step into my African American shoes and say, no, it didn't start in the family. It started in slavery. My ancestors were enslaved for 300 years in this country. We have been free for 100 years less than we were enslaved.
Right.
During slavery, there was a lot of sexual violence and there was a lot of sexual, what I call sexual sickness. Because at a certain point during slavery, they changed the law and they said you could still have slaves, but you can't bring them over no more from Africa. So it gave the slave masters a high motivation to inbreed their slaves. And they did. And that meant my ancestors having sex with their nieces, their sisters and brothers, mothers and sons. It didn't matter as long as they can create more slave children to create more profit, because after all, we weren't seen as human.
Right.
So that's sexual abuse, right? That was happening during
Sure.
the time of slavery. So now slavery is over. There is no specific healing for my community. We're still in economic turmoil. We're still traumatized from everything that has happened in slavery. We're displaced. We're separated, and we go into our families. That creates generational trauma. And a big part of that generational trauma for African American families is molestation, incest, sexual abuse within the families. The Black community doesn't like to talk about this because it's shameful and it's
Sure.
embarrassing. But we should not be ashamed of what was created through our own oppression. What we should do now is work to heal it, because now that pain is being perpetuated throughout our generations.
Right. Right.
So I can, for that specific situation, I can speak for that. I don't think it's natural for human beings to sexually abuse their children and their family.
Right. Absolutely.
I think something happens where their rights are violated in some way, and then it causes a sickness.
Right. Yeah. A strike of evil, a sickness,
Whatever we want to call it. Exactly.
Right. An urge that they can't deny or stop, or things of that nature.
Absolutely. But I don't think it started in the families. I think it started in the abuse, in the mass abuse of peoples. And I can speak for the African American experience. I don't think our experience is super unique.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
In terms of other people experiencing the same thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would agree with you on that in terms of like, whatever the urge or the sense, it's obviously what you're saying, is different potentially from culture to culture in the detail, in the realms that you gave, but the overall big picture that, you're talking about, absolutely, it's not natural, and there's a lot of evil that's connected to it.
So I would say, yes, a lot of it does start in family, given the context we've sat for it. However, a lot of kids that are in the commercial sex industry, they're in foster care. So many of them are sexually abused a second and third and fourth and fifth time in the foster care system. My mom grew up in the New York State foster care system. So I know her story, where she was sexually, psychologically, and physically abused when she got in that system. And I've been connected to thousands of foster care children who have told me about the sexual abuse they've experienced once in the foster care system.
Right. Right. And so to that point, I'd like to just touch on the foster care system, since you're connected to it in this sense. From your viewpoints, it's obviously a very broken, corrupt, and evil path for a child to go down. I mean, I've heard more foster care horror stories than probably. My best friend was in foster care. Her and her brother made it out. Nothing really specifically traumatizing happened to them, but that's a minority, right? And so in looking at that system from your viewpoint, like, what needs to change? What is at least a solution so that we stop this vicious, evil circle of what happens to these kids?
Stop putting children with people that don't know them, and try to figure out how to support and repair families that actually love these children. They might not be perfect families. They might not be doing everything right, but they do love their children in most instances. You know what I'm saying? Nothing's across the board. Some kids just need to be removed from their family.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I'm not going to deny that. But I would say in more of the instances, we're removing kids instead of supporting families.
Yeah. Right. Instead of giving them the tools to fix whatever could be inadequate or lacking, we're just ripping
stop judging them.
Right.
Recognize with your families that come from patterns of historical trauma, historical oppression and generational trauma, and realize that you can't send them to one parenting class and that's supposed to fix everything.
Right.
Recognize from culture to culture, people do parent differently, and everything cannot be done through the Western lens. So, there's a lot that we can do with families. Also, a lot of the people that work like in the system, people that work in foster care, people that work within social services, they don't have a high level of relatability to the people they're working with.
Sure, I can see that.
And that is problematic, because that's how they end up judging and stigmatizing and not helping the way they could. Because, you can judge people if you don't understand the path of their life.
Right.
You don't know what it's like to make decisions based on your child being hungry. So you might be like, how could that mom ever have left her kid at that place? Well, I wish she went and did that. Because if not, she wouldn't have been able to feed her kid.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you've never been in that situation, it's easy to judge. Right. But if you've been there, you still might say, hey, you could have had some better options, but you're still not as judgmental because you realize what it's like to have your back up against the wall. I feel like there's not enough people like that working with the people.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
They get their degrees,
right.
And they're not qualified.
Right.
I mean, it's wild. And I'll tell you when I really realized that. Okay. Therapist, right? Me and a psychologist had developed a 2-day training for child sex trafficking, engagement skills, how to work with kids really well. We dive into trauma, stages of change, stuff like that. So we were contacted by the state of California some years back to go do this training across the state. So we were doing it across the state for 3 years. And we had a team of 7 psychologists, 7 survivors. We'd pair them up and her and I were the lead. So we got to do it a lot and have a lot of exposure and experience with it. On a regular and routine basis, this used to blow my mind. After that 2-day training, therapist would come up to us and say, I learned more in this 2-day training about trauma that's relevant to the work that I do with foster care youth and juvenile justice youth than I learned getting my license.
Yep. It's that ivory tower.
Right there.
Right. It's that ivory tower mentality a little bit that our education system has, right? You're going to learn about something so far removed from it, right? And not be in it and not experience it and not view it and not get to know the people that surround it and take for word what you were been told rather than what you can view, what you can observe, what can you see for yourself and what do you learn from, that relationship standpoint. I completely agree. I mean, I think that speaks a lot. I think your point speaks to a lot of points of specific degree types, right? Mm-hmm. Up in the ivory tower.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then also just, we need things that are more culturally relevant.
Yeah.
We all experience this world through a cultural lens, which means it impacts how we interpret things, what things mean to us, what our idea of trauma is, what is healing to us. That's going to be seen through a very cultural lens for each one of us. But if everything that we're giving people is only through one lens, then where is that really leaving the room for people to understand where this all falls for them?
Right.
So, I think we can talk all day about the repairs to the foster care system. But one thing you said earlier that I just want to go back to is when things are created for an evil reason, they can't do good.
Right.
Foster care was created to create a separate system for Black children, separate from the white system for white children. And that was going to be a different system. This system was created to separate children of color from the white children. And today it's not a great system, but it wasn't created for great reasons. But if you look at the history of it, it's like, oh, wow, okay. The whole foster care system was created for a reason that was not about treating all children equally.
Right.
And about valuing all children the same at all.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Even today, there's still biases that exist within it. Even today,
right.
You're more likely to get removed from your family if you're a Black kid. You're more, what I'm saying? All those biases that exist in the world still exist within our foster care system right now today.
Right. Yeah, definitely large areas of improvement needed in social justice and things of that nature. Even with the juvenile, I was going to ask you to talk on, the same point with the juvenile justice system, because you obviously mentioned and we know that there is a path to sex trafficking that way as well. I don't know if there's any points on that you want to touch on.
Well, previously, we were arresting kids. We're not now, thankfully, in California at least. But we were arresting kids 17 years after the law told us they were victims. So in 2000, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act came out and said any kid that is, being exploited in the commercial sex industry is a victim, commercially sexually exploited child, most severe form of a human trafficking victim. So we knew that law, but for 17 more years in our state of California, we continued to arrest these kids. So they were regularly and routinely at the juvenile justice centers. And oftentimes those folks did not have a lot of the trauma knowledge. So they would do a lot of shaming and blaming of these kids. Oh, you back again? Oh, you must like this, huh? And these are kids that have been sexually abused throughout their life, are traumatized, and are now being sex trafficked by adults. So I think it was actually a really unfair state of things where they were just being arrested and taken to the juvenile justice center. We had to shift the law to really realize this should be an issue handled by our child welfare department because it's an issue of child abuse. Neither entity, I would say, is doing a great job at the time when we first tried to figure this out, but we still want it to be in the right farmhouse.
Right.
It's not an issue of child delinquency. It's an issue of child abuse.
Right. Right.
Let's just at least get it to the right place first, because there were kids that would go in and out of juvenile hall all the time, but not get any help.
Right. Yeah.
They were being arrested. They would go in, they would get out. I had girls that would be in there sometimes 9 times in 1 year, but never got any help in that process.
Right. It's the perfect classic example of putting attention and trying to fix the byproduct rather than going in and looking at, well, what's the actual why? What's causing this? How do we handle that rather than, it's a sign, it's a manifestation.
it's like say a 10-year-old's online and they send someone a picture, a naked picture. You don't say to the kid, why'd you send the naked picture? You say to the kid, who asked you to send that
Right.
picture? You know, you got to get the blame where it goes. And who received that picture? Because we know it's most likely an adult. But I feel like a lot of times when things happen with kids, we're directing the question to the kid, and why did the kid do, or why did the kid go, or why did the kid say? This ain't about the kid.
Right.
Kids shouldn't have to be out there worried about adults trying to take advantage of them the way they do. Childhood is supposed to be sacred.
Right. Yeah.
And as a community, we're all supposed to protect kids during childhood. And guess what? If childhood was sacred, and if, as a community and a world, we all protected kids during childhood, the whole world would be a great place. Because most of us get messed up during childhood.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that sums up a whole lot of issues that are across society. So on that note, let's go over, for parents, like what signs should parents be looking for in a child to recognize the signs that they're being exploited?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't want parents to have to look for signs to recognize your kids being exploited. I want you to spend time with your kid. Right? So let's talk about prevention, then I'll get into signs.
Yeah.
The way you prevent your child from becoming a victim of the commercial sex industry is you have a relationship with them. And you spend time with them. And you prioritize that. And you talk to them. And you let them talk. And you don't just tell them no, stop, don't. You actually listen to them and you give them options. And as they become teenagers, you practice harm reduction, where you say, no, I don't want you to drink at all. But if you do, these are some ways I want you to stay safe. Because the reality is they're moving towards adulthood at a certain point, and they're going to make some decisions that may not be the best ones. We still want to make sure they're the safest as possible.
Right.
Another thing would be, from a very early age, talking to your kids about sexual abuse and inappropriate touch. Making sure they always know it's okay to come forward and tell you. Making sure you give them all the tricks of the game. If someone does something to you, they will tell you they will kill your mom. They will hurt your family. No, they're not. We got you. Because these are all the things they tell kids because they know that will scare them so much, they will never tell nobody. So giving them that kind of education, asking your kids periodically, has anything happened that they're uncomfortable with? Monitoring their online activity. Because over half the kids that have been trafficked since 2015 have met the recruiter or trafficker online. Don't let your young kids play video games that are on the internet. Download stuff. Let them play stuff that is more manageable, that you can kind of control who they're playing with. Talk to your teenagers and your preteens about their social media usage, especially if they're on social media. How often should you talk to them about it? Every day. Does it mean every day it's an interrogation? No. You may say, hey, what's up on Instagram lately? How are things going on TikTok? Sit with your teenager and watch TikTok videos with them for an hour if they want you to. Stay engaged with them. A teenager is like a toddler. They need our attention. They need our love. Even though they can seem a little bit annoying, they might be a little moody, and they are dealing with the time in life where it's a lot of things coming at them. And even more with this generation, because of the internet and social media, they need us to be present in their life as their adults. So that's what I want to say first and foremost. Now, if you've gotten to a place where you are concerned about signs with your kid being sex trafficked, some things that went wrong already. I'm just going to say that honestly. And not with the kid, with the parenting of the kid. But it's okay. Things go wrong sometimes. So I'm not saying this as a judgment. I'm saying this as just to be honest with everybody, to be honest with you, right? If you have to look for signs that your kid's being sex trafficked, you have went wrong somewhere. So I would say one thing is trying to figure out where things went wrong. Because there's something has disconnected. Okay? Couple things, new belongings. You have your kid coming in with expensive purses. They have cash. They have anything you didn't buy for them. We know this world is not that kind. People aren't just handing things out. So where did they get it from? How much did it cost? Where did it come from? Being sure to carefully monitor that. More than one cell phone is something else that stands out in my head with kids. Missing from school or from home in patterned hours. So it's like, well, now they've been leaving every Friday and they're not coming back until Sunday morning, but they say they're staying with Tiffany, but I just don't really feel like they're staying with Tiffany. So being gone during these pattern hours would be another one. Signs of domestic violence. So it can seem like, oh, is this teen dating violence? But it's not teen dating violence. It's really trafficking. Another one that I've seen a lot is they have these adult friends now. Adults don't just kick it with kids. But now they have like, this maybe woman who's in her early 20s and she's their friend. She's being their big sister. Or now they have this guy he's their play brother. Just these things that don't make sense. You know what I mean? I would definitely say that being secretive. A lot of secrecy with phones, with the internet. And that could be more than one thing, but that's just a sign that I've also seen as well. I would say those are more of the signs that I think parents would see. Like in a foster care, juvenile justice environment, they might see additional things. Like they might see kids trying to glamorize the commercial sex industry to other kids to try to see if they can get them involved, like recruitment.
Got it. Yeah, that was extremely helpful. I mean, I think those are all extremely valid points for parents, and I am glad, you made the point, and I'm not a parent, so I'm going to say this kind of freely with, not a tremendous amount of experience, but with the number of people that I've talked to and children I've talked to and people in this industry, that it does start with parenting, and the disconnect that comes in those ages and what that kind of slippery slope that gets real slippery very quickly that a child can go down. And it's okay to invade a little bit at times if needed.
Oh, yeah. And that's two things. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you said that. Two things. One, if you're a parent and you've had your own trauma, you have to deal with it. And I know healing is a lifelong journey, but the number one way that disconnect happens that was just spoke of is because parents have their own trauma. And then when their kid is going through some similar things, maybe earlier on, before it gets too bad, they just are kind of disconnected from it because it brings them back to the things that they dealt with in their own life. Right. So if you've had anything that's happened in your own life, whether it be sexual trauma, whether it was physical abuse, just any mental abuse, remember, if you don't deal with that, it will come out in your parenting. Right. We parent how we were parented unless we consciously understand that how we were parented was not great and we're trying to do something different. So just realizing that, but also what you said, a lot of parents nowadays, like I'm all about letting kids be like, I'm a free range parent. So if you say strict parent, free range parent, I'm a free range parent. So I'm a free range parent, but you don't get a complete privacy in my home.
Right.
They're all adults now. I'm 19 and my 28-year-old still at home, 27-year-old lives in Texas and engineer doing his thing. But it was never that way. Like they always knew, I'll go on your phone if I need to, but I'm not an annoying parent that's just going to be going on your phone to be annoying and just invading your privacy. If I do it, it's a safety concern. And if it's a safety concern, I will do it. Mm-hmm. And that was basically our agreement with everything. If it's a safety concern, then your privacy is not going to be a big thing if it's a safety concern. But I'm not just going to be reading through your notes, trying to read your journal, and just being a nosy a parent that's like invading my kid's privacy because that causes them to go even further underground.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I think that's incredible advice. So let's talk about child welfare and how that can help, if it can help. Like the child welfare system?
Yeah. I think that for this particular issue, what I think would be the most helpful, it would be that child welfare systems would have sexual abuse units. I think sexual abuse is a very specific type of abuse, and it's very rampant in the foster care system. And where I've seen the most success was in San Francisco. It was way back in the days when I was doing some work with them. And it was when they had a sexual abuse unit and they could really kind of isolate those cases and give specialized support to those cases. I think that would be a really good thing for this issue of child sex trafficking.
Right.
Because then at least they can be doing preventative work, right? We know automatically that almost every child we've met that's sex trafficked was sexually abused in earlier childhood. So if we had caught those cases and they were in a specialized unit, we might have been able to create a specialized pathway that would have led somewhere else and not the commercial sex industry. I'll give you an example. I hired a young lady back in the days when I was running an organization in Oakland, and she had previously worked for the public defender's office, and she was working for them as a child abuse investigator. That position ended when she had come to work for me doing the sex trafficking work. She said her mind was blown. She said, Nola, you know how many cases that we've gotten for teenagers that are sex trafficked who were my child abuse investigation cases when they were 5, 6, 7, and 8 years old?
No.
She said it was almost like a direct line.
Yeah.
So that's why I say a sexual abuse unit within child welfare agencies would allow us to kind of disrupt that. by looking at the specific things and becoming more experts at the specific things we can do when child sexual abuse happens to interrupt that line from sexual abuse during earlier childhood to child sex trafficking during teens or early adulthood.
Yeah. It makes complete sense. It happens. Let's handle it. Let's help that child through. Let's help them, get over that trauma as soon as possible, as much as they can, so that they don't end up in a worse situation. It almost makes too much sense to have something like that.
Can I be honest with you about a lot of this stuff when it has to do with child trafficking?
Yeah, please.
I hate to say this, so I don't want to sound like it to sound awful, but it's true. A lot of people, I can't say in the world because I'm here in the United States. A lot of people in our country like to have sex with children. So sometimes there's not a lot of motivation to do things that prevent people from having sex with children.
Right.
And I mean, it's a horrible thing to have to say, but it is a reality. That's why child sex trafficking is so, rampant, is because people like to have sex with children. And that's why so many kids are sexually abused. 1 in 3 girls and 1 in, I think it's 5 or 6 boys are sexually abused in our country by the time they're 18. Well, who's having sex with all these kids?
Right.
So it's like that becomes an issue in and of itself. It's just that there is a lot of sexual attraction that's happening with children, and we're also perpetuating in our society. Like how we'll make a grown woman model look sexy, but we make her look like she's a sexy 12-year-old.
Right.
Why?
Right.
Why are we promoting sex with kids?
Right. Right. It's incredibly evil. It's just,
I think it's so evil because like childhood is such an innocent time. And I mean, of course, kids are gonna, be teenagers, and at a certain age, it might be before they reach their adult life, they're gonna start having sex.
Right.
And we pray to God it's consensual and it's a good experience. You know how much I pray to God? My daughter is 19 and I just pray to God. That was my biggest prayer her whole life. Not don't let her have sex. When she finally has sex, let it be consensual. Let it be of her choice.
Right.
Because so many children, especially girls, but children across the board, don't get to make that choice.
Right. Right. You don't have to apologize for saying that because it is so true and it's not talked about enough, and in that we in the United States are the number 1 consumer of right? It's like, hello. I had this woman on who has an organization that helps children who were sex trafficked, right? And helps in the recovery process of it all. And when she was getting involved, she was white in her, probably late 40s, early 50s. And she asked the agent that she was working with, like, well, who buys this? And he goes, frankly, your husband.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a specific demographic that does purchase and are the consumers of this. But you don't ever apologize because it just doesn't get talked about enough. Right. Like I said earlier, the amount of organizations around this topic and how prevalent it is it just surprises me every time I bring someone on like you who works in this area.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's all these organizations around the topic, right? But I mean, a lot of organizations, and I'm sad to say this, they're not doing what they're supposed to do.
Sure. That would make sense.
And this is why I say this to you, because I agree with you. There's so many organizations around this topic. But you know how often people have to call me as just an expert in the field with a victim because nobody will help them? And then we got to figure out through like an underground railroad, like technique, how to get the young person help, even to the degree that my own sister has had to house one of the kids that were sex trafficked that we didn't know, perfect stranger kid from another state. Nobody would help this kid. We're calling multiple organizations that have funding and have the ability. And so on that note, I want to shout out an organization that's in California called Love Never Fails, and a woman named Vanessa Scott. Because whenever I reach out to her for help, it's real help. Money for people, place for them to live at, diapers, clothing, getting them out of dangerous situations. And I just want to say, like, I've called on a lot of organizations when people call me and there's a victim that needs help. And my name is big in this field, and I will say that you do not get a lot of help. And I can only imagine if I'm calling for people and it's hard to get help, what does this look like for a victim that nobody knows?
Right. That's a good point.
That is trying to get help. So yes, there are a lot of organizations working around this issue, but how many of them are actually relevant hands-on and helping people, that question I can't answer.
Huh?
But I would say it's a struggle when
Yeah.
someone reaches out for me to get help for them with all of these victim organizations that are here around this issue.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It's just very unfortunate to hear, but I don't doubt it whatsoever. But on the other note, can you share with us some of your successes you've had in doing this work?
Oh yeah, there's been so many successes in doing this work over the years. I mean, just in seeing, people rebuild their lives and just have wonderful and bright futures. I could think of so many girls, just off the top of my head. I could think of so many girls. One girl comes to mind with me right now. She's now a grown woman. She's in her 30s. She's a wonderful mother of 4 children. She's been married for most of her adult life and raising her children. Her children are successful. They're like her oldest kid's like 14 now, straight A student, singing beautifully in talent shows, and her life has been very stable and beautiful. This is a girl who was being trafficked throughout her teenage years. This is a girl who was, abused throughout her childhood and was terrified. And so these are the stories, these are the successes that I have. You know what I mean? I have 1,000 of them like that. I could think of another girl who went on to get her degrees. She went on to work in our field. She's went on to make a huge impact and be one of the most influential young people that are doing this work today. I know some people that aren't doing the work or dealing with anything in our field at all, but they're just being so successful in different aspects of our life as people in the cosmetology field, people in journalism, people in law, people in the medical field. It's just been really beautiful to watch how possible it is for people to rebuild their life with the right support, the right patience, and the right understanding. And none of this happens quickly.
Right.
I've seen these people, their success unfold usually over a decade.
Right. Yeah, I think patience is a proper word there,
But the success has been endless. So for anyone that feels like, oh, I wonder if people like this can ever be helped. Oh yeah, I've seen so much success. You know what I mean?
Totally.
That is one thing, like, especially at this age, I'm 50 now. And I started doing this work when I was in my early 20s. So, now I really have been able to sit back, and many of the kids that I first helped when they were 12 or 13, they're in their mid 30s now, or even going into being 40 years old in some cases, depending on what age they were. And so it's not just success in the immediate. I haven't just seen, someone could be successful a year or two later. I've seen success in the long term. And you know what that means? Generational success.
Yep.
Because now they're shifting the next generation. I think of another girl right now who was raised in foster care her whole life. She is such a lovely mother. Right now, her kid is not even 5, but she is an amazing mother. So just, changing the generational trajectory is, I think, the most successful thing that we can do.
Absolutely. That's incredible. Absolutely. And so just, as we're getting to the close of this, you're also a motivational speaker. And who is your ideal audience? And who are you trying to reach?
So I'm a motivational speaker, but I'm also what they consider a master trainer. And so I'm usually speaking to and I really am trying to reach anybody that will listen, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm usually talking to people in the social service field, people that do mental health work, the faith-based community, law enforcement. So I would say in a nutshell, like first responders.
Mm-hmm.
And people that also support people in more of their long-term recovery, like therapists, case managers, resource specialists, advocates. So kind of across the board of people that are supporting people across the board, either in the immediate first responder aspect or more on that long-term support. I train them all. And also politicians. I mean, there's like really no one I don't train. Like drove up mountains to places where I was scared to train a living room full of like 5 little old white ladies. And then I've been in places where I've trained rooms of, thousands of people. Wow. So I think wherever people will listen, the information is important to be heard. Obviously, it's my career now, so I go where I'm paid as well.
Yeah.
I do have to eat, but so that has to control some of it.
Sure.
But I'm here today and I'm not paid. So obviously I do
sure
like to speak about this topic, not only for money, but because I think it's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Priceless information, if you ask me. And so if one wanted to get your training or hear more about what you have to offer or what your training is, how would they reach you?
Yeah, you can reach me. Well, I have a website, NolaBrantleyspeaks.org, but you can always reach out to me directly at NolaBrantleyspeaks.org. And that's the best way to contact me.
Beautiful.
Well, for some, I'll get back to you.
Excellent. I want to thank you. I want to thank you first and foremost for the work that you do and have done for, like you said, 20 plus years at this point, and the thousands and thousands of young men and young women that you've helped. I think again, priceless to be able to have the ability to confront and look and dive into something that has so much evil around it and have the patience and the passion and the empathy for someone. It takes a special individual, and I really want to acknowledge you for that. And I hope you do know that about you. So thank you.
I do my part, but I appreciate that.
We need more like you. And then thank you for your time today. Again, like you said, this is a tremendously important topic, and your information was invaluable. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, dear. Have a good one.
Absolutely. And that's our show for this week. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned. I hope you took away the importance of this topic, what you need to look for, and how to actually prevent this issue from happening to yourself and your loved ones. And as always, until next time, I will see you.